Hello everybody, John York here again, and I am going to be covering tonight the operational side of the business model canvas. And this piece, which is the left side of the canvas, we'll focus in on, I call it efficiency and operations, but what we're looking at is what do we need to do within our company as with partners to deliver our value proposition, and at what cost. So the first piece that I get at is what we call key resources. Okay, and those key resources, I like to use an acronym called PIPPC. So it's a good way to remember those key resources that your organization need to have. The first is physical assets, and this could be those capital-intensive things: the equipment, the buildings, the plant, the vehicles, the infrastructure for your IT, and your distribution networks. So they're very, very key in the physical aspects, and they're very capital intensive, I want to underscore. Another capital intensive resource, which is critical, especially in the tech as well as in the biomedical field, is intellectual property, particularly patents. But in other areas where you create software or you build brands, you also have other intellectual property protections, such as copyrights, trademarks, and even trade secrets. Coca-Cola is a very good example of probably one of the longest lasting trade secrets. Okay, and it does represent protection of the time and investment, especially in terms of high-tech products that take a number of years to get developed. And the goal of a patent particularly is not of allowing you to be exclusive, but to prevent others from being able to utilize that property to make, manufacture, or sell, sometimes even to research a particular piece that you own the patent to. It's a very fascinating area. I could do a whole lecture on patents. Ideally, if you have a technical piece, you need to have a patent attorney, and you need to think about how broad your patents. You need to create what we call a wall of patents to protect yourself from intrusion. You also, as an entrepreneur, need to think about, as you're operating, in terms of what patents are out there to give you freedom of operation. Now, the other pieces that are there are P, okay, which is people or human resources, which are very critical, particularly in the knowledge-intensive research and development and creative industries. Okay, so our scientists, engineers, creatives, even our consultants in many of the consulting agencies. And last but not least is money, capital. Okay, and that comes into stock ownership, cash flow, credit, and that allows you to be able to operate the business. And having a good credit line, having good investment flow allows the business to be able to continue to operate. So that is PIPPC. So activities that goes above the resources, and what we think about is what are the most important actions a firm must take to be successful. We sometimes call them key success activities, key success factors, but they're required to create the value proposition, customer relationships, and market access through channels and effective revenue model. So some of them are going to include your sales and marketing, to build customer relations, to build a brand, okay, to drive, get, keep, and grow, as we talked about beforehand, to create sales leads. Distribution is handling all the inventory and being able to get that product through the wholesalers into retail, or being able to handle in terms of, if you're handling in terms of e-commerce, you'll see these massive warehouses and distribution networks that Amazon has to be able to make sure that the prime customer is able to get their product quickly and efficiently and in one piece. Production. Okay, and this is not just in terms of manufacturing, but also design and supply chain management. And then, like if we look in the consulting business, it might be problem solving, okay, in terms of knowledge management, training, problem identification, and solution creation. In the IT space, we think about platform and network in terms of developing that platform and managing, servicing, promoting it. Very critical in tech spaces which are dependent. Credit cards are a very good example of that. Banking is another good example that is there. And then let's think about when we have key activities, we have a tool or a concept called critical success factors. And these critical success factors are metrics. Okay, so in sales and marketing, it could be units sold, it could be average selling price, it could be market share. You can go through and look at some of the metrics that we use in social media in terms of eyeballs, click-through rates, funnel rates, conversion, consumer conversion, efficiency of the funnel, cost of customer acquisition. On the production side, we might be looking at productivity in terms of manufacturing costs, in terms of cost of goods sold, and the various lean operations metrics, e.g. like throughput rates. Then problem solving in terms of, again, a rate of effectiveness of your solutions you look at, but also the time for your solution, implementation solution, and especially in those type of businesses which are relation driven, such as in consulting and in advertising, is the ability to retain those customers. And then platform network is looking at their effectiveness in communicating with other platforms, so the integration, the transactions through the system, and the efficiency in handling traffic, and system uptime and downtime. And this is just an example. We talked about this in the previous discussion, so we won't belittle this, but I did want to point out in terms of the funnel efficiency, which is that rate moving through the funnel, okay, which is the efficiency in terms of being able to do it, and cost effective is when you're able to drive more customers through, more efficient, okay, because then when you do that more efficient, then what happens is your cost to activate a customer, which is the total dollars you spend on marketing activities to get a customer, is decreased. And then you look at another piece called the lifetime value of the customer, and this is sort of a concept I talked in the customer relationship side in the last video. And then we get partners, okay? And who are these key partners? Well, they are a network of individuals, firms, suppliers that make the business model work. And the partners offer various capabilities that you might not have and you shouldn't have from a cost standpoint or from just the standpoint of capabilities. For instance, if you're a small firm, you shouldn't be carrying a lawyer directly on staff or an accountant. So like at our firm, we outsource some of these activities. And then you might build such reliances to allow us to do a variety of things in optimizing resources and activities. And these can be in terms of how do we build scale and reduce costs? How do we reduce risk by going to uncertain markets, by working with key partners, through joint ventures, or acquiring specific resources, activities to execute the business model through our supply chain? So, some examples in terms of, first and foremost, is suppliers. Who are your key supplier relationships? They are the supply chain. They are raw material, but also you could think about all the pieces that you might outsource to get things done. Legal, human resources, advertising, marketing, accounting, and benefits. Strategic alliances, though, are another type of partnership, and that is between non-competitive firms that function to reduce the inventory of items that provide for a complete product or a service to expand market research. E.g. is Intel Inside, batteries with toys. Those are two very good examples. But then you could get into a concept called co-opetition, where you have direct competitors that share costs or market together, and they work together in terms of a trade organization or develop industry standards. A good example is ANSI or IEEE, Fashion Week, Pharma. We have a Paso Robles Wine Alliance. And then joint ventures, which are collaborative efforts to develop new business or product. We see this in pharmaceuticals, especially with small companies with larger companies, or companies sharing expertise to reduce risk, or where we have a product it's in one market and another company may be dominant because they're large as a multinational global, that it makes sense to have a joint venture to get into other markets. We see this as our multinationals try to do business in China. They may have to have Chinese partners. Also is that Japanese pharmaceutical companies have actually come and partnered with U.S. companies to be able to make sure that they're able to get product distribution access there. So it goes two ways. So it gives you a sense of some of the different types of partners that we have here. So then we get into the costs. And the cost structure that we think about is, is the business model cost-driven or value-driven? If it's cost-driven, such as we're looking at really maximizing the volume in manufacturing size, so the cost per unit is decreased, okay? So you're looking at a very much of a lean approach, okay? And your value proposition is based off cost and price. So Southwest Airlines is a very good example. Even say Walmart is a very good example. Then contrast is value-driven, and those are companies that focus on creating value, okay, with high degree of customization. So luxury hotels such as Four Seasons Ritz-Carlton, custom chopper shops that are there, and you have even like agencies like mine that do specialty work, or consulting firms that do specialty work. And then we have what we call economy of scale, which is you are trying to create clear advantages with larger output, and you have that advantage of scale. The classic is the Ford mass manufacturing on a single auto body platform. It's amazing. We see this with the manufacturers of automobiles. Economies of scope is looking at cost advantages through a larger scope of operations where you could run maybe multiple products through a single type of manufacturing line, or using your distribution network to be able to move multiple products through. And I think this is a very good example. We see this in the beverage business where companies will go and buy new beverage companies. Microbrews are being bought by, I think InBev bought Firestone because InBev has a broader distribution network, but now they have more products that they can offer through that network to be able to extract greater share of dollar or wallet from both the consumer and the retailers. So we're dominating share of what we call shelf space because of that. Or we saw this with Wonderful Company buying Justin, because Justin already had distribution, but Wonderful Company now has, if you know Wonderful Company, they have Fiji Water. And if you know how widespread Fiji Water is, you know the distribution power of the Wonderful Company. And those type of costs that we have to think about are they fixed? Okay, they tend to be large up front, they tend to be capital intensive. Equipment, IT, and salaries. Variable vary with the volume of goods and services that are being produced and marketed. And there's a high degree of customization, personalized service will lead to variable costs. Music festivals, consulting work are examples of businesses with high degree of customization, variability of costs that are there. And then we get into some basic cost concepts that I don't want to belabor, but I think it's just sort of useful to think about. And it's break even, okay, which is really a balance out of those fixed costs divided by your variable costs that are there. Variable unit price, variable unit costs, that's divided into the fixed costs will give you the number of units to get to a break even. On the flip side is there is a concept called the net present value. You'll also see a similar concept related from financial in terms of internal rate of return. But what we look at net present value, and this is just a quick spreadsheet of it, of looking at your discounted cash flows that have come from revenues in the future that have been discounted back to time zero and have compared versus your investment or your costs that you are spending in here. And what the concept is that a dollar today is more valuable than a dollar in the future. So if your initial investment today will translate to dollars in the future that are much greater, and usually look over a 4 to 5 year period, that you can be able to translate out with a discount rate back down, that those revenues in the future will outweigh the present investment, then you have a positive net present value. And that's a very important concept. We've already talked about this in terms of costs, and I think one of the things I want to add to the cost to activate a customer, which is basically all the stuff it spends to be able to convert one customer, is really this, what I call the net between the lifetime value of the customer and the cost to activate a customer, is really that critical cost metric that we have to think about in terms of customers and also customer segments which are expensive and which are not. And then last, which is very critical to many startups, is what we call cash burn. And this is basically, if you sort of look at how it translates, it's the income statement that you have that is overlaid by what you have in the bank as well. And so if you're not bringing in income and you have a lot of costs, so you have costs of goods sold, and then you have a lot of operational costs, what happens is that you're burning cash. And what you start looking at is that burn of cash versus the cash in the bank. And you look at over what your average quarterly cash burn is versus the money in the bank, and you can then project how much time, and so investors look, how much time do you actually have left in terms of cash in your business. So that just sort of gives you sort of a sense of some of the basic financial concepts here. I certainly hope that this was helpful, and I look forward to talking to you about it further in the future.